different, unique, extraordinary, versatile, community-minded. What do these words have in common? Moets. They will dress you elegantly, uniquely, or for ploughing the back 40. Any occasion. Help you set your scene, be it fine dining or a backyard picnic. Unusual gifts, cards, just to say ta, make you giggle, cry, or sparkle at the event of a lifetime. From boating and sailing necessities to toys for your tot sandbox. Whatever you require to fix your wagon, home secret garden, or indulge your furry companions. When you need support for your cause célèbre, fundraiser, or charity, Moets has been there for you for over 110 years, an integral part of our community, part of our history, part of the Salt Spring heritage. And if you have the need for a public comfort station, also known as the loo, Moets has provided that too.
Here's another Apple Photo Salt Spring snapshot.
In 1873, the Government Gazette carried a notice of incorporation. It was called the Corporation of the Township of Salt Spring Island. The council was to have 7 councillors, but from the very beginning of incorporation, there became a radical division of island residents, and the incorporation ceased to exist 10 years later. Come down to Apple Photo on McPhillips and visit us for all your photo printing needs. From your passport photos, personalized image products, digital printing or scanning, Apple Photo has got it.
Apple Photo. It's alive with history.
We are the Troublemakers.
Presents the Troublemakers. Eric Booth, Paul Marcano, and Drew Clarke sitting in as extra rabble-rouser power. And it's a Thursday afternoon, 5 o'clock on Salt Spring, and there is a buzz in the air. Mr. Booth.
Yes, it's not very hard to look very far to find trouble today. The last few days have been really quite remarkable, culminating in the cancellation of the public hearing last night. And I think probably let's start talking a little bit about the events of last night, because I think the thing that I found the most disturbing of the entire evening was the presence of 4 RCMP officers. I have never been to an Islands Trust meeting on Salt Spring Island where someone believed that the presence of the RCMP was required packing 38s. And while I appreciate the gendarmes for their protection of our rights, at the same time I thought it was totally inappropriate to have an RCMP officer standing inside the public hearing, not seated, but standing inside the public hearing, observing what was going on. And it's being reported online this morning that one citizen went up and asked the officer, what was he there in official capacity, and he evidently responded to her, and I'm only repeating what she has reported, is that he was just there as a citizen. Well, that doesn't jive with other reports that I've had, which is that they were asked to be there. I do not know at this moment who asked them to be there, but I find it totally inappropriate.
Well, maybe they'd like to call in. This is a call-in show. Callers are always welcome. 250-931-7999. Paul?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Eric. That was one of the first meetings I've gone to, and I was very surprised to see police at the doors. And, this isn't a hockey game.
Is this a tactic? Are they trying to discredit disgruntled, legitimate disgruntled taxpayers as some kind of angry mob?
When one of the things we were talking about just before we went on air, and perhaps, Drew, you can share your experience of last night with regards to what you were asked to do and where you were asked to do it. Maybe you share that with us.
Well, I didn't really have any stomach for going into the meeting per se, so I was just in the lobby using my eyes and ears and talking to the occasional person who passed by or stood and spoke with me for a few minutes, which was great. At 5:01 precisely, our friends from the RCMP showed up, and for the most part, I think we all have to agree that we accept all these guys into our community. They treat us all pretty good.
Hear, hear.
Of course, there have been examples in other parts of the country and world where situation hasn't been good for people who are in our situation, a legitimate tax-paying electorate, frustrated at not being able to get the trust to see why it is that we feel disenfranchised. The economy's in tatters. The regulations are frustrating every effort we make to try and make ends meet here, and it's akin to the clearances of the Highlands in Scotland in the 1747 episode, where they didn't exactly throw anybody off the rock, but they just made it so darn hard for them to stay that they had to leave. And some people are wondering, well, when we can't go to a meeting and express our concerns over these things, and then repeatedly over the years it's that way, we get frustrated. Not many of these people at the meetings that you saw working people write into the paper or anything. And when they won't let you get up and actually express yourself at the meeting without telling you to sit down after 2 minutes, you really feel disenfranchised, I think, and the frustration builds and builds. And it's much more than just this RAR thing, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely.
I can toss that out to you, too.
But just before we go further, though, what I wanted you to do was to actually...
I was asked to leave the building. I was talking with 2 other people in a moderate tone. I was not handing anything out. I was not suggesting to anyone.
This is outside of the public hearing meeting room.
This was just inside the front doors, about 10 feet in the lobby over by the stairs downstairs. And we were having a very quiet discussion, just observing and watching. I knew that the shooing of a majority of the people into the media room wasn't going to last for long. I refused to go in there because I said, you could lock us in, couldn't you? But anyway, so I was just standing there having a quieter conversation than we are, and I was asked to leave, go outside and talk outside. By
who?
By one of the officers.
By one of the RCMP officers.
Yeah, I was asked to leave the building,
So
which I
now-
did. Which I did.
This is, to me, unbelievable that in Canada you have you're in a public place,
Town hall meeting,
having a conversation with somebody, and somebody has directed the RCMP in such a way, or the RCMP has felt compelled in such a way, to ask you to leave the building because you were in the middle of a conversation.
Yeah, very quiet and civilized conversation. I wasn't preaching revolution or anything. We were just talking about the general situation. It was nothing. It was innocuous. And I felt I thought, well, it's a public building, it's a public meeting and everything else, but... how far do you want to stretch these guys? There is a limit, and we have to recognize that, or get Jakanski'd or whatever. So,
but really, RCMP officers are sworn to uphold the peace. Mm-hmm. You certainly, from the sounds of it, weren't breaking the peace.
No, we were very quiet.
They had absolutely no right to come up to you and tell you to do anything. And I think what disturbs me the most is not knowing who asked them to be there, because if somebody asked them to be there, then they would have been given some kind of a briefing as to why they needed to be there in force.
I know why they were there.
Well,
they were there because the wonderful bunch feel threatened because there are, disaffected taxpayers within the community who go to those meetings and are frustrated and unable to be heard. and stomp out mad.
But that's
and to the rest of you, believe me, we're not a threat to you guys. This is total fallaciousness. We're frustrated because the trust has been freezing us off the rock. And if you don't think the economy on this island is in trouble, and you don't think it's because of the regulations, wake up.
Yeah, but with all due respect, I mean, you're making an assumption.
I'm good at that.
And
that's why I'm here.
And I've noticed, the underlying question, I'd love to hear this. If there's anybody listening that
931-7999
that is from the trust that would like to explain who called the RCMP, or the RCMP would like to
931-7999
explain to us why they were there, under what authority were they there, and what instructions, if any, were they given.
Well, and what can we expect Saturday? My God, Eric, I mean...
Well, this is. You'd pointed out that under a few decades ago,
3 is a riot.
Exactly. This sounds ridiculous. Okay, I know it sounds ridiculous.
Maybe the trust has their own War Measures Act.
Let me finish with my but.
Oh yeah, the policy of.
It sounds ridiculous because, frankly, it is ridiculous to have this kind of a situation occurring on Salt Spring Island. I just find it is completely shameful. And if the trust had any kind of a problem, what they should have said, listen, RCMP officers, could you please wait outside? If we need you, we can ask you to come in. Yeah. But until somebody is actually breaking a law, to come in and have police presence standing there with arms folded, okay, overseeing the public hearing.
Yeah.
What? In order to maintain order?
They weren't in a chilled-out posture, but this is
shameful.
All that was going on last night and the night before was Canadian democracy in action, or an attempt thereof.
Here.
Plain and simple.
And the presence of the police was an insult to the average person going in there.
I think it shredded any credibility.
You feel as if you were, being watched or guarded, or you should be careful about what you say.
If you ever had a warm and fuzzy feeling about the trust, it ended last night, in my opinion.
Well, I found the most interesting fact that came out of last night was something that Chris Nichols had said, which is he reported the number of letters that had been received regarding the proposed bylaw, and he reported that only 30% of the letters received were in support of this bylaw, which means, from the perspective of looking at what does the public think, 70% are not in favor of this bylaw. The fact that you get over 350 people showing up for a public hearing, I believe that this may be unprecedented on Salt Spring Island as far as participation in local government.
And it just scares the pants off the trust because they didn't want anybody to come.
Well, that may be the case.
And that may happen on Saturday. I mean, what if no one showed up on Saturday?
Well, with regards to Saturday...
I've thought about that.
Well, I mean, really, it's a Saturday, beautiful, we're in the middle of a beautiful summer that's starting to come on here, and these guys are agitating the community.
It's absolutely the worst time of the week to have rescheduled this meeting to 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. And what it means for the average person is that has already shown up for 2 nights at 5 p.m., fully prepared and making arrangements with babysitters or whatever, adjusting their schedules to be there to participate in the public hearing. Now they're looking at a 10 a.m. start, and if you want to be heard, that means you have to show up, in essence, at 10 o'clock in the morning and wait until you have a chance to speak.
That's right.
Now, in that regard, I started to think about it last night, and this morning I came up with what I thought was a reasonable response that would help perhaps the trust mend the current broken trust with the public. And I sent off this letter. I'm going to read out this letter. So this was sent off at just before 11 o'clock this morning to the chair of the Salt Spring Island Local Trust Committee, as well as the regional planning manager and the trustees. It's addressed to Trustee Sheila Malcolmson, chair of the Salt Spring Island Local Trust Committee. Public hearing of proposed bylaw 449 on June 25th, 2011. Dear Sheila, given the events over the past few days, I'm asking you to seriously consider my following suggestion regarding the public hearing now scheduled to reconvene at 10 a.m. Saturday morning. Not being a Salt Spring Island resident, you may be unaware that a Saturday here is quite different than on Gabriola. Saturday is one of the busiest days for most islanders. My suggestion is that upon reconvening the public hearing at 10 a.m. Saturday morning, you announce the hearing will recess for lunch, pardon me, at 12 noon, reconvene at 1, recess at 4 for supper, and reconvene at 5 p.m. This will allow virtually everyone wishing to attend the opportunity to show up at 5 p.m. without the fear that if they don't show up at 10 and stay for the rest of the day, they will lose their opportunity to be heard after having shown up for this hearing twice already and having been turned away. Under the circumstances and the inconveniences the public has already been subjected to, arguably because of poor planning, I am sure Salt Spring Islanders would be greatly appreciative. While I understand you would likely have to wait to make the announcement upon reconvening the public hearing, you could announce today that you have heard this suggestion, like the idea as it may help to make amends of the inconveniences to the public, will give it serious consideration, and announce your decision on Saturday morning. In other words, you can let the public know you have heard and support the idea. If there is no procedural question of propriety by making such an announcement, it would then be up to you to decide whether to proceed with the idea or not. I will be reading this letter to the public on my radio program this afternoon between 5 and 6:30. I would be happy to also read any response you have to it at the same time. Further, I would be happy to relay your reply via Salt Spring Community List with over 2,000 subscribers, Facebook connections, CFSI radio public service announcements, email lists, etc. All you have to do is reply to me before 5 p.m. today via email. My hope is that all members of the public who showed up on Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons will be given ample and convenient opportunity to be heard on the most controversial issue on Salt Spring Island in 6 years. As of
very well done, Eric.
Thank you. As of 5 o'clock today, I have had no response.
Yes, silence is consent, though. Maybe that means it's okay. We're taking a break. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Troublemakers on CFSI.
Trust matters.
Ankle deep in doo-doo, working plunger overtime.
For septic tank repairs or installation, call Andy, 537-6609.
Smell much like roses, septic tank blues is on my mind. Andy Hickman and Ward Drummond, their names keep me humming. They're gonna fix my septic tank blues.
You are listening to CFSI FM 107.9, broadcasting from Salt Spring Island.
Mr. Marcano. Get it off your chest, laddie.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say, because recently the Island Tag Team was able to, under the Freedom of Information Act, get a hold of a lot of the data that represents services that the Islands Trust has enlisted year by year. And the papers that I was looking at covered 2010, 2011. And you know, I was curious. You know, Eric, you had mentioned that the mapping project on Salt Spring might run somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000. And there I was looking at Chris McNichol's wages paid since November, coming to something like $45,000 just to present the facts to us. And I'm just, you know, where is the priority with the Islands Trust when it comes to paying bureaucracy over actual practical things like mapping Salt Spring on behalf of the residents so that they're not saddled with this bill whenever they want to build something?
Well, I think once again, when we're talking about the accurate mapping question, it goes to the heart of some of the biggest concerns that Islanders are expressing. Accurate mapping, according to the estimate that I received after spending 5 minutes sending an email to the same consulting company that did the accurate mapping for North Pender, South Pender, Saturna, they came back within a week with a detailed 5-page estimate of just over $42,000. Now, if you add on 5% contingency and HST, it's around $50,000 total. But I had that estimate, you know, within 1 week after spending 5 minutes of energy. We are now over 6 months into this process, and the latest letter that I received from the Islands Trust, which was from the Director of Local Planning Services, used the figure, the estimate, and he used the word ballpark of $100,000, in spite of the fact that they have been provided with the estimate that I had from Madrone Consulting. So in spite of the fact that they have got what appears to be at least a real estimate, they are still using a figure of $100,000, and the highest figure during this whole process has been from Trustee Torgrimson when I asked her how much she thought it would be, and she had said initially hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah. I had asked her where did that figure come from, and she said, well, I just heard it around. It's being sort of used around.
It scares the public.
So, yeah, exactly. Well, it scares the public from the perspective of, gee, we can't afford this. And in fact,
we've got is good enough.
The word impossible was used in the initial staff report in January by Mr. Nichols with regards to the cost of accurate mapping of Salt Spring, that it was impossible because of the cost.
Well, that sounds like an impossible bylaw then if it can't be verified by mapping. And what really bothers me about this is that even if you paid $150,000 to do the mapping, that's nothing compared to individual homeowners each doing their own study through a so-called professional environmentalist.
And you also have to remember that...
Gravy train for them.
What a gravy train.
Exactly. And you also have to remember, though, that the mapping that was done on North and South Pender and Saturna, and Maine for that matter, was what? It was paid partly by Salt Spring Island taxpayers. We spend about 40%, or pardon me, we contribute about 40% of the Islands Trust budget from Salt Spring Island. 40% of that mapping that was done for the accurate mapping of North, South, Pender, Saturna, and Maine was paid for by Salt Spring taxpayers, which means when you take, say, the $50,000 estimate and you go 40% of that, it would mean it would actually only cost Salt Spring taxpayers around $20,000. And so getting to what you just said a second ago, Paul, which is how many QEP reports that would be unnecessary would be gotten rid of in short order.
I would feel far more secure as a homeowner knowing that a professional mapping had already been done
by a professional.
And that I wasn't just hit or miss, with a one-on-one relationship with my local professional environmentalist.
Waiting to be pushed over the cliff.
I guess. I mean, and you look at this kind of legislation and you wonder...
That's ravine, not cliff.
Once again, though, you see jobs threatened, landscapers, which is the main thing people do here on the West Coast, I mean, you're not going to be able to landscape your property very well if you have to consult with the
well, they'll
professional
put your taxes
environmentalist.
up if you landscape your property too. If you leave it in
there's
a
a double
natural
barrel
state, you get a preferential deal.
Okay, so I'd like to move on to some of the more detailed parts of this proposal, and one of my expressed concerns to the local trust committee in the last few days has been improprieties with regards to following trust procedure. From what I understand, it was reported back to me that they feel, this is only one person's opinion, in spite of the fact that I'm quoting chapter and verse of the trust policy. And it appears to me at this point that they've decided that they don't have to follow trust policy. That is from what I can tell at this moment, that's what their feeling is. But, when we start looking at things like what happened on June the 2nd as an example, when the June 2nd the third first reading of this bylaw was given, they did a consolidation of two maps. Up until then, there had been two maps proposed that were going to be included within the bylaw, Map 21 and Map 21A. At the June 2nd meeting, the trustees approved the new first reading, which included a consolidated map of the riparian area that they're proposing. The problem with that is, and I was there and videotape will confirm this, is that they didn't just consolidate the mapping. They actually expanded the area when they did the consolidation. So this is no longer consolidation. They expanded it. And I showed the new map to a friend of mine who happens to be living in the expanded area. So up until the time that I showed him that, he had looked at the other mapping, seeing that his property was not going to be affected, and wasn't really all that concerned. So without any notice to the public whatsoever, without the staff talking to or telling the trustees that they had expanded the area, they went ahead and expanded it through giving it first reading. No notice to the public whatsoever. And now you have some property owners, certainly I know at least one that I've spoken to, that is outraged that this was pulled so surreptitiously. Mm-hmm. And people wonder why there is an outcry against this. This is just one minor example of this, and absolutely no indication to the public that this had occurred.
I thought when we got there and the officers showed up, they were there to protect us from the trust. I was happy for a second. But
oh, you got a warm, fuzzy feeling, did you? Sorry. But what you're saying, Eric, these two maps, do you happen to know the authors of these maps?
Well, this is where it gets a little...
Are they accredited? Did someone with credentials create them, or was this just another committee selected by the trust to come up with a map?
This is where the plot really thickens. Okay. Because what the public has been told is that the existing map 21, and as far as I know, this part of it is true. The existing map 21, which is in the current OCP, was developed primarily based upon mapping supplied by Kathy Reimer and the Salmon, or the Island Stream and Salmon Enhancement Society. Now, when that mapping was originally supplied to the trust in around 1998, according to Kathy Reimer, and I'm quoting a published report within the Driftwood, she said that mapping was never meant to be accurate. So since 1998 to now, to this very day, we have been living with inaccurate mapping.
Basically a thumbnail sketch.
A thumbnail sketch. So here's what they've done, is they have taken that mapping, which basically shows what amounts to a 20-meter strip, 10 meters supposedly on either side of a stream, which is the current setback requirements, and they have expanded that to be 30 meters on either side, supposedly, of the stream. So what they've actually done on that mapping is they have expanded the inaccuracy. So that's map 21 currently. The map, as far as the green shaded area, if you've seen the map out there with the green shading, that supposedly came from the Ministry of Environment. Okay, and it was supposedly done in conjunction with a group of UBC students. Now,
no kidding, a coloring book exercise.
Did they come over here, or did they do it from UBC?
I do not know. I have when I went through the public hearing binder, I could find no information whatsoever on how this mapping was actually developed. Mm-hmm. All I've had is this report that it was done in conjunction between the Ministry of Environment and the and UBC students. So the problem or the question that comes up is, this supposedly, when this green shaded area map first came up, this was supposedly the map from the Ministry of Environment. So my question is, so when did that mapping from the Ministry of Environment change? Because it obviously changed at some point before June the 2nd. Somebody colored in another watershed, and there is absolutely no indication who did that.
Wasn't accurate, you know, Eric?
Yeah, and
that map wasn't
I can't believe what you're saying, Eric.
Yes,
I
that's
can't believe what
very
you're
interesting.
saying.
Well, a lot of people don't believe what I say.
Yes.
I always challenge them. I always challenge them to prove me wrong.
Well, I have to go back a little bit here because you played this one out on me last week when you said that that I misquoted the 70% or whatever. It's basically when you said 70% of the people were opposing this bylaw, I think you meant 70% of the letters received.
Which is an indication. I mean, this is like taking a poll, except this is probably more accurate than a poll, in that we have had, 6 months of the public listening to this, reading about it, etc., and the feedback that is coming from the public is at a 70-30. This is becoming a well-informed public, and I would venture to guess that if this process was delayed another 2 weeks, that 70% figure would actually grow, and the 30% support for the bylaw would decrease, because you've got more people being made aware of what this bylaw is about now than ever before.
And the outer islands who are also affected by the same bylaw in some form or another, and I wonder where they're at right now and how they're feeling about it.
This is
a call-in show, so our number's 250-931-7999. Anybody who'd like to join us
out there.
Yeah, you can always call in. You can pretend you're someone else. We'll never know. But we would like to hear from you. It's Paul Marcano, Eric Booth, and Drew Clarke. We're the Troublemakers. It's coming up on to 5:30. Gentlemen, a quick word, but we do have to go for commercial break here in a minute.
Well, I think maybe after we come back from commercial, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through a couple of the definitions within the proposed bylaw.
But I would like to ask Eric some personal questions before he gets into that.
Go for it now, Paul.
Absolutely.
Can I? Because I just wanted, because Eric, this is a wonderful venue we have here, because we actually have someone who has been an Islands trustee. Okay, and when I, the question I would ask Eric when he was sitting on these committees and the public was there in front of him, and did you ever feel that you needed to be protected, or was there any sense of insecurity about facing a larger group as opposed to a smaller group that might show up
Absolutely
regularly?
not. Absolutely not.
And tell me, the other question I have, on a personal level, when you're sitting there and you're not required to answer or engage the questioners in any way, are you really, in fact, listening and taking in that information and changing anything about the way you feel? Or are you being like Trust Council was, people like myself would write letters explaining why you shouldn't have a budget increase.
You just sit there with the shields up.
Oh, yeah, just put him on the pile. Let's nay on that, Is it just really just yay or nay? And does it really matter? Does it change the course of where the trust is headed here? All of the energy we spend, is it really going to change their minds, or is this just the eyewash formality of public input that is required in the legislation?
Okay, now you've asked about 3 questions there.
Okay.
So as far as my personal view, what did I do? And while I was sitting there listening, I was reprimanded once by a member of the public, because as people were talking, I was taking notes, but I was entering them actually into my laptop. Okay, and this member of the public,
thought you were on Facebook.
This member of the public got up and said, "I wish you would stop that. That's really distracting." And I said, "Well, I am writing down what it is that you're saying, because I think what I am hearing is important." The question of whether or not what one particular person says or another says, will it change my mind? If they have a valid point, yes, it will change my mind. The whole purpose of being a trustee is to maintain an open mind. If you're hearing something from somebody that makes sense, then you should be taking note of it.
But Eric,
we're probably moving into the second question, which is do you think that the current trustees or the current administration is actually listening to what people are saying, or do you think they're just waiting for people to finish what they're saying and get on with the process? Is that the question?
And chalk it up as to whether it's a yay or nay. This is kind of what we got from Trust Council when they passed their budget. They were simply taking letters that people spent time on and simply placing them in piles as to pro or con, without regarding the content. This is what I think is very frustrating about communicating or spending even an iota of moment trying to address
this. Guys,
trust.
We're going to take a station break, and we'll be
continue
right back.
That thought.
We will hold that thought. You're listening to the Troublemakers on CFSI 107.9 FM, Salt Spring Island, and CFSI-FM.com. We'll be back in about 60 seconds.
Starbucks. We all love Starbucks. Bet you like Starbucks. The best pet food store. Starbucks. Got pet feed, Starbucks. For all your animal needs, Starbucks. Go there today.
Starbucks, it's the place to go for all your farm friends and critter supplies. Have a free coffee when you stop by.
Starbucks, for stuff that's gross. Starbucks, on the Fulford Ganges Road. Starbucks, try it today.
Spring cleaning for everyone. 20% off selected gardening, horse, dog, and cat supplies.
Yeah, Now we got some good music happening here. Our resident genius, Paul Marcano, has recorded this. Yeah, we'll give you a little taste right now, and then what say we end the show off with this, Paul?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, sounds pretty good.
Thanks, Drew.
Okay, well, it's 25 to 6. You're listening to Troublemakers with Paul Marcano, Drew Clarke, and Eric Booth. Gentlemen, we were holding that thought.
Okay, Paul, during the break here, I was telling Paul I'd like to relate my own personal experience as far as being a trustee in the very first meeting that I was a trustee, and it was really interesting. I didn't exactly know what to expect, but I was at the Lions Club. I mean, it's clear as a bell today as it was then. I'm behind the table. I'm on the other side of the table when the meeting starts, and it just came to me like an epiphany. This is what a judge's role is like. A judge is there to listen to the evidence in a case, take all of the information in, listen to the witnesses. Do I believe that witness? Do I not believe that witness? The police report, the DNA evidence, etc., and then make a decision. Now, in the role of a trustee, it struck me all of a sudden, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be taking in information from the staff. I'm supposed to be taking information in from the public. I'm supposed to be meshing that with what I believe would be make Salt Spring Island a better place, and I'm sure everybody has got their own sense of what that would mean. And at the end of the day, come to the conclusion and the decision that I think is in the best interests of the people who put me there in the first place, the electorate of Salt Spring Island. Now, that was that happened in an instant, and I realized that. And what I also realized is that my job was not to be talking. My job was to be listening. Listen to everything everybody said, and in a lot of cases, what a lot of people said did not make a hoot of sense to me. In a lot of cases, what they said made a lot of sense. I'm constantly open to hearing somebody either take exception to what I say and explain why, and I'll be the first one to say, hey, I stand to be corrected on any issue.
Well, what you've just said, Eric, scares the living daylights out of me, okay? The idea...
He looks petrified.
Oh, I am. I mean, trust me. What you've just said is that that a person who decides to run for the position of Islands Trust, okay, is going to suddenly wake up behind the desk thinking, I'm here to judge the situation here on the merits of the evidence. And I'm just wondering on a level of, the kind of credentials that a judge needs to make the right decision so that people are not hurt, properties are not devalued. You've got a situation there where you're expecting the trustees to act as almost judge, jury, and executioner in this case, and I find that really scary.
Yeah, but that is the nature of politics. The decisions that are made are political decisions, and you can't get away from that because that is the system that we currently have.
Yes, but under the trust structure, okay, you don't have an appeal process. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, but I think, with all due respect, when you're saying we don't have an appeal process, in
Vancouver.
Oh, you're talking about bylaw infraction. Okay, in any municipality, in any local governance, you have elected a town council, as an example, who will make a decision. If they make a decision that is so egregious as to be that somebody said, listen, you've gone way beyond what the limits of your authority are, you can take them to court and you can sue them and have, as an example, a bylaw overturned. But other than that, you have elected these people to make the decisions in the best interests of the community on behalf of the electorate. And that's no different in the Islands Trust than it is anywhere else. When you're saying, well, you don't have an appeal, well, you don't have an appeal at a municipal level either, other than the courts. And you certainly have the appeal basis to go in the courts in the Islands Trust. And in fact, it's part of the Trust's largest part of the budget is dealing with litigation these days.
Oh, and yes, and I noticed also that it's in dealing with pre-litigation factors as well.
But yeah.
And what you were saying last week in The Independent, I think, about the fact that you didn't think this bylaw was going to be sufficiently adequate to get the signature of the minister.
That's correct.
You still feel that way?
Completely. And I think my prediction is that once it gets to the minister's desk, if it makes it that far, it will be returned to the local trust committee because it is ultra vires of the Local Government Act as it exists today. And you know what? I have tried in many different ways to express this to the trust committee. They certainly
yesterday you tried, and they said,
actually,
shut up and sit down.
Yeah. So I've tried in a number of different ways, and I've obviously expressed my my opposition to this bylaw. I'm not about, at this moment, to tell them why I think this is going to get turned down by the minister. This has gotten so convoluted and bent out of shape and they don't want to listen. It gets back to your point. To me, they do not want to listen. And I'm going, great, go ahead, pass it as it is, because it will be coming back to you unapproved by the minister. That's my prediction, and
okay,
I'll take bets.
Would you like to put a $5 bill on that one?
You want to try and win your $5?
The show gets interesting.
I actually let's take a brief.
Here we go.
I did print out the oath of office here that Eric was kind enough to find and send to me.
You got a picture of the flag,
and I'm just I think we need a third opinion, and I think Drew, if you could study this and tell me, but I really don't see any evidence.
Your Honor, could you just wait for a moment?
The oath of office shows any sign of being.
Boys, let's see here. What's this now?
The plaintiff would first like to make his case to you, and then I'll make my case to you, and then you can as a third party.
Oh, I see. Sure. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Okay.
This is for
yeah. All right.
5.
Get my.
Do you want to reiterate what I was saying last week?
Absolutely.
Okay, just a second here. Now, this court is now in order. Behave yourselves, both.
Okay. Well, I'm complaining.
Oh yeah, that's right. You're troublemakers.
Okay, I'm a complaint. Yeah. But I also made the statement last week that I didn't feel that the oath of office for an island's trustee really included any significant allegiance to the taxpayer or voter who voted for them. And
that's right.
Eric believes that the oath of office more than covers that because theoretically it's under the Government Act. But if you look at the oath, line by line, there's nothing here that says... the only thing they're saying here in the oath is that I'm not being bought by somebody.
Okay, Eric wants to have a look at that now.
Remind me never to use you as a defense lawyer.
Okay,
so here's what the oath says. I, Eric Booth, do swear that I am qualified to hold the office of local trustee for the the Salt Spring Island Local Trust Area to which I have been elected. I have not, by myself or any other person, knowingly contravened the Local Government Act respecting vote buying or intimidation in relation to my election to the office. I will faithfully perform the duties of my office and will not allow any private interest to influence my conduct in public matters. As required by the Community Charter, I will disclose any direct or indirect pecuniary interest I have in a matter and will not participate in the discussion of the matter and will not vote in respect of the matter. Now, my point, excuse me, I have the floor. My point is that under the Islands Trust Act, the Act says that a local trustee is elected to represent the electors of the local trust area. So when I am elected to represent you and you.
Now, that's not fair. You're going beyond the oath into all the legislation that created the Islands Trust. But it says right here, in no uncertain terms, it says here that I will not allow any private interest to influence my conduct in public matters. Now, the private interest, I'm a private homeowner, and you're saying I will not allow a homeowner to influence me with their opinion. And if I'm sitting there at a trust meeting and I'm giving my opinion, I'm
complete misinterpretation, Your Honor.
Well, not misinterpretation. It's right there in black and white. Give us a read.
I'll probably see it sometime later, Paul.
You sort of skimmed over the fact that the first line it says that it's the office of the local trustee, and that office of the local trustee is to represent the electors, period. And that's it. As far as private interest goes, what that is referring to is saying, listen, I can't, because I own a subdivision over here and I want to increase the density, I can't do something to further my private interest. And that's all that it's. I rest my case.
Drew, maybe at the end of the show you can say who owes who what. But
Yeah,
getting back,
we've got $5 on the
getting
line
back
here,
to the
but-
other one, though, I think it'd be a hard one to bet against. Derek,
We're going to bet on a few
Yeah.
commercials. We're going to bet on coming back in a couple of minutes, and we're going to bet that
I
you
think
all
the
are going
$5
to
you
be
get eaten up in
listening.
lawyer's fees in the blink of an eye.
We'll see you in a minute. And you're on CFSI 107.9 Salt Spring, -fm.com. Marcano's hot to go. It's the Troublemakers, Marcano, Booth, and Clarke. Go for it, Paul.
Well, I just think it's a little unfair with Eric coming here with his music stand and everything. And he's got all his notes and he's all ready to go here. And the thing is, if he's going to get into this legislation in the kind of detail he's suggesting, I hope he's going to sing it. At least make it somewhat entertainment. Like, give us a
that would hardly be entertaining if I sang it. So I want to just jump into a couple of these things because there's a lot of misinformation that's out there, a lot of representations being made about different things. But let's just concentrate on a couple of things here. I'm going to spell out or read out the proposed definition of a ditch in this bylaw. Ditch means a small or moderate depression used to channelize seasonal water flow. They are characterized as being man-made and straight, with no significant headwaters or springs. They are constructed to drain property. They often form property boundaries or roadways and are not part of the natural historic drainage pattern. Okay. So you move on to the definition of a stream, and within the definition of a stream in the same bylaw, a stream includes any of the following, and under C, guess what shows up? A ditch. So a ditch in this bylaw is a stream. Now, what's interesting about this then is as you're reading through the bylaw, anytime you come across the word stream, you can interchange the word ditch with it. Okay.
How bizarre is that?
Now, here's the point. I made this point to I was just talking with a lady from CBC radio earlier on this afternoon. And I said, here's a situation where if you have rain falling on your roof, going down into a gutter, and coming out of the bottom of that gutter is into an open drainage ditch that eventually makes its way to the Ministry of Transportation ditch within this development permit area, that drainage ditch going all the way up to your house is a stream under this bylaw. And you have setbacks from that drainage ditch. How ridiculous!
Well, you got a
is
setback
that?
from the drain pipe on the side of your house?
Well, not yet. They haven't added that yet. But that would be the next step to. Well, now we're going to put a development permit on your gutters and your roof.
What are we going to do with this bunch? Come on, you guys, help us out here. 931-7999. Now, I know all you guys are sitting out there listening to the show, and you got lots of things to say
about the show.
So call us up and turn our crank, because it's 6 months until election time, give or take, maybe less. We need to get things fleshed out. We want to hear from you. We want to know what's been bugging you, why, how you think we can make things better. Let's get some dialogue going on here. Paul and Eric and I don't want to sit here flapping our lips forever, so 931-7999 is the number. Show some guts and call.
Ooh, that's a challenge.
Well, it is a challenge, and around here you pretty well have to bonk somebody upside the head to get them started. Come on.
Having said that, we are very respectful, and
of course we are.
Okay, I just want to make that point that if you call in, we love debate. And I would love somebody to call in and say, Eric, what you've just said doesn't make any sense, and give me the rational
exactly right.
reasoning as to why that is in fact the case.
Let's get it on.
After all, the three of us don't agree.
Not always. I thought you were paying for dinner.
I thought you were. Well, there is a point, though, just another sort of niggly point that came up at the meeting, and that was just a directive from the chair that if you were going to videotape this event, that somehow, you were supposed to train your camera on the stage and leave it there and totally neglect anyone who gets up to speak. And as far as I'm concerned, if I'm taping a meeting for a friend or a family member who can't attend, I need to be able to tape not just the stage and the faces of the trust just sitting there doing nothing. I need to be able to show on camera who's speaking on behalf of the community.
And why not?
And why not?
Well, I mean, unless
you know
they're
what?
trying to
There is no...
quiet the natives.
All along, though, the trust has been trying to say no videotaping, and they've narrowed it down. They've narrowed it down so that you're just basically looking at...
Excuse me for just a second. You just made the statement that all along the trust has been trying to do this.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
My mistake.
Your mistake.
That's right.
They didn't start trying to do this until one meeting that I was recording the meeting.
Okay,
and
guys,
I
we've
was
actually
asked
got
to
a
stop.
brave soul calling in.
Fantastic.
Now, we're going to take this call. I'm going to advise the caller to keep it clean. We don't want to beat up any trustees. Caller, how you doing today?
Good. My name is Jill Treewater.
Oh, hi,
Good
Jill.
afternoon, Jill. It's Paul, Drew, and Eric. How are you doing, and what can we do for you today?
Well, I wanted to let you know that yesterday I arrived at Art Spring for the meeting. I was greeted by Lisa Florido, said, "Hi, Jill. We have a special place reserved for you." So she took me to the very middle of the front row, right smack in the middle, and it had a little piece of paper there saying "Reserved for Jill," and it's right next to John Boyd. I think he's the water guy, and it just felt very strange to me that I have to sit right in the middle, because then I can't really turn anything. Besides, I'm short, so I can't really see above the stage.
And so, Jill, do you feel that something's up? I mean, aren't you allowed to sit anywhere you want in there?
Well, I did sit in the back row, but I was given a lot of flack for it.
What's going on there, Jill? Explain to us what you think's going on there.
Well, they don't want me to tape anything.
Oh, I see.
This is...
What's your feeling on that, Jill?
Well, it's every single time. Every single time I am restricted. I cannot turn my camera. And I don't. And usually I'm very good about it. But this is a public meeting. Why is it that I cannot? Not that we've ever gotten to the speakers yet. Yeah. Oh, do you not understand that this was about videotaping?
Oh, yeah, we understand that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought.
We're getting the idea. We're making sure that the listeners do too.
Okay.
And thank you so much, Jill, for providing those tapes and putting them on your website. Gosh, I can't tell you how valuable those have been. I especially liked your recording an interview with Peter Frinton on Bowen. That was fantastic.
That was good.
Joe, why do you suppose anyone would have some interest in muzzling you? Isn't this what's going on? I mean, if you're being limited and directed to where you can sit and how you can video and whatnot and rather, do you feel you're being treated fairly? Are your constitutional rights being regarded to the fullest degree, or how do you feel about that?
Of course not. But, you know, it's the same thing. You have the local trust committee meetings in the middle of the day when nobody can be there.
So they're trying to direct the outcome of these things despite our dissatisfaction, and they don't want anyone to know the natives are restless.
You know, I find this to be, once again, another unbelievable occurrence that a member of the public was singled out prior to her even getting there and being told where she should be sitting.
A member of the press.
Somebody directed Lisa to do that, unless she took it upon herself, which I kind of doubt. But this, again, it is, to me, it's an obvious attempt to try and limit what is being videotaped at what is clearly a public hearing. And, you know, when this whole videotape thing came up with the LTC, however long ago it was, when it really blew up, and Tracy Smith stood up and stood her ground and said that she was going to continue filming no matter what.
Yeah.
That's the way we have to do it.
When that process happened...
Canadian way.
I contacted Czech TV and I spoke to Scott Fee, who's the anchor person at Czech TV, and I said, listen, this is what's just gone on over here on Salt Spring. We're being told that we cannot tape a public meeting of the local trust committee, and I said, have you ever heard of anything like this? And he could not believe what he was hearing. He said, Czech TV has never, in all of their years of showing up at public meetings throughout any municipality on Vancouver Island, ever once been told by a local government that they had to control their videotaping.
Joe, we're going to give you one last word here. We got a break for commercials at the top of the hour, and thank you so much for calling. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Nope, not really. Thanks for the show. I really enjoy it.
And ask your friends to call in.
I will.
We would like to hear from everybody in the future, so please, and thank you so much for being our first caller.
Bye.
Thanks, Joe.
Now, you guys, we got a couple of commercials to run through here. Actually, oh boy, it looks like it's going to take a couple of minutes. So run for a sandwich, crack a beer. We'll be right back. And never fear, the troublemakers are going to hang in there with you. So, and if you want to call in, you can be caller number 2 after Jill. That's our first caller. That's great. 931-7999. Now, Troublemakers back on the air. We got a half an hour to go. How far are we going, boys?
During the break here, I just whipped out to the car and brought back a bottle with some
looks
liquid
like a
in
urine sample.
Okay. Paul, would you try and describe what you're seeing in front of you here right now?
Well, it looks like
ditch
iced
water.
Tea. It looks like iced tea to me. I know that Drew thought it was urine, but no, this looks like iced tea. Yeah. Would I drink it? The cap.
I wouldn't open it if I was you.
No,
it's not sealed.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
This is this specimen
Dark
here
liquid.
is not a urine sample. What it is it's water out of McFadden Creek. And this is what natural water from McFadden Creek looks like.
Because it's a cedar bog.
No, it goes through a peat bog.
Peat bog,
yeah.
Okay.
So this is the kind of water that is being protected by this bylaw because they want to save this color of water, which I really don't think any fish could possibly live in.
Well, they do.
And speaking of fish, though, Eric, what's the idea?
If there were any fish, they would live in it, but there's not.
What's the purpose of removing the fish-bearing definition to these waterways?
Yeah, that was an interesting change.
It's very simple. With the fish habitat in the definition of stream, with it in there, it complies with the riparian area regulation. By taking it out, they expand that area. So it's no longer to do with just fish habitat, it's to do with every stream and
every rivulet.
Every ditch, because a ditch is a stream.
Well, they should be forced to put it back in, and that's another question I have, and that is...
They can't be forced to do anything. It's a local government.
I understand, but, the real nut of it that gets me is that this is already a provincial fact for people who live in British Columbia, these areas. Why is there a redundancy in having to regurgitate it or even sort of do what the trust seems to be doing, which is customizing just for salt springers?
Well, it's very simple. I mean, and it's been plainly stated in the newspapers. The purported purpose, is to protect drinking lake watersheds, of which my understanding out of the 24 watersheds that are being protected, 8 of them are drinking lake watersheds. So the other 16, which aren't, are being protected anyways. And even some of the areas outside of it are also being protected. So this is really, it's a continuation of the 1998 attempt to blanket Salt Spring Island with development permit areas in an effort to slowly move towards having nothing else happen. And that's, that kind of a statement, right? Somebody says, oh, well, that's paranoid, that's where they're headed. Listen, just south of the border, I just saw a 12-second video clip of this guy saying basically, we want to bring the Iron Curtain down and shut down all development. And this ideology is really, it's religious in its fervor, and it is here. It's extreme, and in my view, that extreme pendulum swing has gone out way beyond the breaking point and is now fastly moving back towards the middle of the road common sense. And that's why currently you're seeing a 70-30 split on this issue. The game is up.
Well, even the greenest of Salt Spring owners, property owners, have a wallet to consider. And they also feel very strongly about private property rights. And it's been my experience in 25 years here that they will occasionally rise up and say, no, not doing that. And where they're normally very green trust supporters, if it pushes them too far financially or corrals them on their property, they tend to say, nah, aren't having that.
Yeah. I mean, this would be an entirely different discussion if we had no protection for fish habitat right now. Completely different discussion. But we do have,
well, that's what
and
you're
have
saying,
had since
you
1998.
felt it was adequate and that we were in compliance ever since then. Or 95, wasn't it?
Since 2005.
Yeah.
And scientifically, you can make that case. Certainly in a court of law, you could make that case because what the science shows is that the effect of these setbacks that we're talking about, the first 10 meters is the most important part. After that, it exponentially drops off. So your shade, your leaf drop, your erosion factors and everything all happen, the majority of it happen within the first 10 meters, which is one of the reasons why when I was talking about Michelle Jones and she was saying that, here's sort of the rule of thumb and that 10 meters is sort of the minimum.
Yeah.
That's because the vast majority happens there. Now, if you've got something as wide as the Fraser River, then yes, you can see maybe a 30-meter setback. But for what we've got on this island, we have sufficient protection.
I think there's more going on here. It's been my belief for some time that when you stick unlimited buckets of money in front of planners and set them loose, that they're going to go crazy. I mean, they just can't help it. They can't help themselves. They simply...
Well, they
don't operate any other way.
I am going to disagree.
We're planning ourselves off of this island. We're giving them money to plan our disposal.
Well, I'm going to take I'm going to take exception to that. Planners are directed by.
When are we going to be finished planning, Eric?
But just let me finish my thought. Planners are directed by the people we elect. If we elect people who want to spend 6 years reviewing an official community plan as
I don't hear that.
This current...
I don't hear that, Eric.
Wait, that's what's happening, though.
Okay, all right. Sorry.
The last 6 years, we have been reviewing the OCP.
That's right, yeah.
We have reviewed this longer than it took to actually create the OCP in the first place.
We're supposed to create a new one every 5 years.
No, we're not.
No?
We are not supposed to create a new one.
We're supposed to review it every 5 years.
We're supposed to review and make minor tweaks, but you're not supposed to go back in and recreate.
What I've been told is the trust runs the trustees, that Linda Adams runs everything there. The planners run the trustees. The trustees have no power around.
No, that is not true.
Well,
I'm speaking from personal experience.
But in the first few pages of the OCP, it clearly states that the trustees are at liberty to change this at their own discretion without any consultation.
Well, they would have to have the agreement of the other trustee, then they would have to get it past the third man or woman.
Well, I'll have to bring that in next
trust
week.
council.
I'll bring that in next week because it really doesn't qualify.
I mean, the trustees on Galliano tried to do that. It didn't work too good for them.
You're talking about the exception, which the one time within Islands Trust history, where Islands Trust Council and the Executive Committee both voted down a proposed bylaw that was passed by a local trust committee.
And it was also the exception that those trustees took a bylaw to Victoria that didn't meet their needs or interests, and it was the first time for that as well. Yeah. No trustees have gone to Victoria, to my knowledge, and said we don't want this before. And they were also the first trustees turned down.
That's not a great statistic in my mind. The Trust Council really only rejected one decision. I mean, Trust Council is supposed to oversee...
No other trustees have had the cojones to bring any controversial decisions back to Victoria, maybe.
Well, that may be the case, but
how do other islands feel? If you're on the outer islands listening to this show, call us up, 931-7999. It's everybody's ballgame here.
Okay.
Yeah, Outer Islands, Galliano. I don't care. Maine,
I'd love to hear
Penders,
from
Saturna, Gabriola.
Yeah. How about Bowen? Hey,
hear
Bowen.
from some of the Indians on Valdez if there are any still there. I don't care. You guys call up. Bowen. This is your show, 931-7999. It's not just about Salt Spring and the Islands Trust. These policies and regulations will affect everyone in the area. And the other islands, to be honest, are far more fragile economically speaking than we are. And if we're getting crunched, what must be happening there?
Well, you bring up an interesting interesting point when you talk about the other islands, and then you start looking at the populations on the other islands, and you start asking yourself, you know what? There's hundreds of islands in the Islands Trust area.
13 that are populated, though.
But why doesn't the trust just
go
look
to
after
those? I know. I love it.
The agitation.
Send them to Afghanistan.
This idea of agitating the public over the minutiae of these bylaws is unbelievable.
Like we weren't alive in the 60s and didn't get the message, eh, Paul?
I guess, yeah.
How dumb do they think we are, eh?
I don't know. There's Eric on his BlackBerry.
Yeah.
iPhone.
Paul's just brought up an interesting subject here, and I'm just going to do a quick search on it here.
You're listening to the Troublemakers on CFSI 107.9 FM and CFSI-FM.com, coming to you on the web, live from Salt Spring Island, heart of the beautiful, we're not unhappy here, Salish Sea.
We're not unhappy, actually.
I love it here. Okay. I love it here, and I'll fight tooth and nail to keep it the way it is.
Okay, according to Wikipedia, Saturna has a population of around 350 people. Okay, so when you compare that to Salt Springs population, you could say that it's 1/30 of the population of Salt Spring.
Yeah.
Okay, so Saturna, I think the budget for the OCP mapping was in the $5,000 to $10,000
Awful
range.
nice people down
30
there.
times $5,000 is $150,000. So they got the equivalent, the Salt Spring Island equivalent of $150,000 of accurate mapping.
Wow.
And that was fine for Saturna. It was fine for the Islands Trust Council that approved that. The reason that we didn't get anything is because the trustees have not asked for the money. It's as simple as that. People say, well, how do you get money? You get money by putting forward to the Financial Planning Committee your request for funding for mapping.
Well, there's an agenda. We've often thought that there is an agenda. Have you ever considered that there is an underlying agenda to this bunch, Eric?
I'm not sure what agenda you're talking about.
Yeah, well, we're not sure either. But we're suspicious.
That's kind of open.
Yeah, it is. Like, do they really want us here? Or would they be happier if we just left?
20 years ago, I came up with an expression, and the expression is, paranoia means that you're all, or pardon me, the nice thing about paranoia is that you're always the center of attention.
Ouch! Oh, we have a philosopher here.
No kidding. Yeah.
The other one is if you think if you think somebody's checking you out, they probably are.
Well, they're checking us out. We're on the radio talking with Paul Marcano and Eric Booth. We're the Troublemakers, and if you're not checking us out, well,
making all the trouble.
I don't know.
Okay,
I'm not much else.
I want to jump into before we run out of time.
15 minutes to go, Eric.
I want to run into some of the quote implementation measures that are being proposed by the trustees, and what these implementation measures are, in my view, is a way of trying to grease the skids so the public will feel that this is not such a bad thing.
I don't want my
Now, I'm going to read out the resolution, a couple of the resolutions that they made in the June 2nd meeting. A standing resolution, that the Salt Spring Island Local Trust Committee directs staff to prepare the following standing resolutions to bring forward to the LTC for consideration at the time of final adoption of Bylaw 449. So they're saying, we want the staff to prepare some stuff so that when we're going to really consider the final adoption of this bylaw, after it's gone to the trust executive and the minister and it's come back, this is what we want to hear from you. So the first one is a standing resolution that despite OCP Bylaw 434, the Salt Spring Island Local Trust Committee will generally refer development permits for applications to its advisory committees where a report from a qualified environmental professional has been provided with recommendations for how development is to proceed. Pardon me, will not generally. They added the word generally into it. Now, to know what, first of all, you have to understand the first three words of that sentence is a standing resolution. All a standing resolution is, and is an agreement of the existing trustees, we'll just keep this resolution in place until somebody decides that they don't like that resolution and they rescind the resolution. It's not law. So this is basically saying, this is it's a promise from us. We promise that we're going to do this. Well, that's fine maybe until the next trustees get elected and they say, you know what, those guys, we didn't really like that so much, so there goes that standing resolution. Now, there's also then a standing resolution that the Salt Spring Island Local Trust Committee may consider development permit for applications by resolution without meeting, where a QEP report is provided. They added the word may, so you don't know whether or not they will going to it or they won't. It's, again, so now you've got a combination of the standing resolution and a may. The third one is a standing resolution that the Salt Spring Island Local Trust Committee give priority consideration to applications for development permits in Development Permit Area 4. And this really grinds on me. And it should grind on every applicant, any property owner who has an application in front of the Islands Trust, because what they're saying here is, hey, if we get this through and everything's fine, we'll give you priority on these applications, and everybody else who has already had their application in for a year or 2 years, like Slag Lumber and Brinkworthy, can go to the back of the line, because in order for us to gently move this through the public process, this is what our promise is. But it is nothing more than a promise. It is not law.
I believe him. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, as much as that sounds, kind of Mickey Mouse, I kind of prefer it if it's not law.
But
there's something to be said for that, I guess.
It reminds me of the saying, the big print giveth and the small print taketh away.
First you say you will, then you say you won't. First you say you do,
nothing
then
other
you say
than
you don't.
gobbledygook election promises, and that's all that I see it as.
I see. So it's basically meant to satisfy the
fluff. Exactly. And the last point that I'd like to make on this, on these implementation measures, is that they're also talking about reducing the development permit fees for these applications, and I take extreme exception
for
to
those
that.
particular ones.
For these particular development permit
but in order to do that, we'll have to put the fees up on all the other ones.
No,
they will.
No, what'll happen? No, what will happen is that they won't put up the fees on the other ones. But what will happen is the taxpayer will pick up the balance because under the Local Government Act, your permit fees, whether they're for a building permit or for a development permit or a rezoning application, are legislatively, you cannot charge more than the average cost of actually processing one of these applications. So currently, the cost for a development permit is $1,100, which is supposed to represent the average cost of processing a development permit application. They're talking about maybe dropping it down to $200 for these applications. And I can tell you, these are not going to just be, fast and quick and easy and everything else. They're going to take the same amount of time, because when it comes right down to it, it's going to be a question of liability. And I brought this subject up once in this debate going back probably about 4 months ago, and I asked something along the lines of, has staff ever looked at the liability questions when they are talking about, we'll just have a staff member go out and they'll tell you whether or not you maybe need a QEP or not. There is no way that would be allowed, because the liability position they put themselves in is giving themselves basically the qualifications of a QEP to determine whether or not you can do that.
You can sue them and hold them accountable for their decision.
And I'm fond of quoting the Trust's head legal counsel, Bill Buchholzer, and when he's talking about the liability that local government members have in giving out information, that he says, and I've got this in writing, it is a great quote. He says, a local government can reduce its liability to zero if they don't give out any information.
Wow.
So walk into the trust office, and basically what he is saying is, you want to know about your zoning on your property and everything? Here's a copy of the bylaw. See you later. Figure it out yourself. And if it turns out to be wrong, we'll see you in the court of law. Because I'm not going to
We'll let you apply if you think you've got the right thing to apply for, and
we
won't tell you if it's not. We'll just let you apply several times.
Didn't that cost the copy company over $150,000?
Oh, man, it sure did.
I can give you example after example after example where wrong information has been given by
guys, we've got an active mind on the phone here. Let's see who we got calling in. Dude, what's up? You're with the Troublemakers.
Well, I'm just kind of wondering, as a person kind of new to Salt Spring, and I really like the fact that there is food grown here, how does this impact the farmers when they have to take 30 meters back from their hedgerows, which are ditches? Land is so expensive, and I thought the whole sort of thrust here was to be sustainable and independent, and this is going to put perhaps a lot of people out of business who have small plots. Like it may virtually render some of the
well, they have said that they're going to exempt existing gardens. They've backpedaled a little bit, I know that much. But for farmers, it might depend on how recently you've worked your field, although farmers do have more protection than mere mortals.
Got the black and white here.
Let me read out the section that's pertinent to this. Farm operations as defined in the Farm Practices Protection Right to Farm Act and farm uses as defined in Section 2.2, 3, 4, and 5 of the Agricultural Land Reserve Use Subdivision Procedure Regulation are exempt. Also, land alteration and vegetation removal on agricultural land that is more than 3 meters from the high water mark of a stream, except Maxwell Lake, for a farm operation that is consistent with the normal farm practices as defined under the Farm Practices Protection Act. So there is some flexibility for actual farm operations. The challenge, though, is if you're not running an actual farm and you're not getting tax status, etc., then this exemption is not going to apply to you.
So you actually have to be like a registered farmer.
That's correct.
Well, that's, as I understand it, fairly expensive, and that's kind of, it's like certifying yourself organically. It costs you $700 from the get-go, right?
Yeah.
And you got to sell a lot of carrots to even make that back. So, like, I'm wondering how it's going to affect people who want to come and farm here, because you can farm intensively, market garden.
Yeah. Well, you really do bring up an interesting point. And, as far as I know, the whole idea behind the Islands Trust was to preserve the rural lifestyle. And it's just very strange that they seem to think that an overregulated area
and in a sustainable
way is a rural lifestyle.
Yeah,
that's not a rural lifestyle in my mind.
It has to be sustainable, doesn't it?
Less regulation would be rural lifestyle. What we're talking about here with all this regulation is certainly not why people leave cities.
Well,
and
all this regulation hasn't left us a very stable economy, and we need a stable economy to have a sustainable community.
And people like the caller who want to farm their land maybe just for the fun of it, for some food.
Well, I'd hardly say that's going to be for the fun of it in the future, but you're right, caller. Anything that diminishes the use of your land within the boundaries, when you're paying taxes on the whole piece of property, and there are many things that reduce that. There's setbacks for this, that, and the other thing, including highways, etc. But you're paying taxes right out to the edge of your property line. Don't forget that. So you're right to question these things.
The other thing that occurs to me is if you're not an organic farmer, too, this applies to all the non-organic farmers who are out there, throwing fertilizer on, and it is draining off. So they're exempt.
Yeah, it's not very well thought out, and you have to remember that when this whole thing started out, this was about fish. And it wasn't just about regular water. And that's where the waters have been muddied, as it were. So it's the challenge for the average property owner in some of the this regulatory nightmare. They're going to be significant. And
and next up on the block is shorelines. Apparently they're going to be dealing with shorelines.
Green Shores, that's a San Juan County thing.
As soon as they're finished with this one, they're on to the next one. So
ladies and gentlemen, we're kicking off the show.
Welcome to Salt Spring, by the way.
Yeah, it's 25 after 6. Thank you very much, caller. Feel free to call in again next Thursday. Yeah, we got to move along now. This is Drew. Paul, thank you again for coming today.
Yeah, thanks,
Eric. I'm holding my breath in anticipation of the meeting on Saturday morning at the high school. 10 o'clock. Please be there.
Well, if we can get over 700 people, it'll be canceled again.
Well, I guess, unless they load us all off into buses and send us off to the camps. So.
Oh wow.
Poor Drew. This is Eric Booth. And I'm Drew Clarke.
We're the Troublemakers.
We are the Troublemakers.
And we'll be back next
every
week.
Thursday at 5 o'clock to 6:30
coming up
in rush hour traffic.
Thanks for being with us, everybody.
Bye, everyone. On different matters, everything from A to Z.
We got the skinny, we got the bad news, we got the good news. We're going to take it apart and put it back together, and Salt Spring's going to be a happier place for it.
We not only cause trouble, we fix it.
And you can phone in and help fix it.
Tune in Thursdays, 5 to 6:30 for the Troublemakers.
Hey, everybody, we have breaking news. The meeting on Saturday has been canceled. I'm expecting a phone call here shortly, and...
So
there's people you know.
So the public hearing has been canceled for Saturday. It will be rescheduled at a later date. The quick quote I can give you is, we hope that allowing more time before rescheduling the public hearing will give everyone an opportunity to understand the proposed bylaw and make constructive suggestions.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Meeting canceled. Back to regular programming. Thanks, everyone.